know.
Watch that number rise.
Yeah, start jumping up. Good morning, guys. We're going to hold on just a minute to let you all settle and for your connections to be made.
They're all going in with social distancing, right? So
yeah, oh yes, definitely. Social distancing must be adhered to, guys. I hope you've got your hand sanitizer as well, just in case.
I think we have to have it at the door if people have studios and things now to tick the relevant criteria, don't we?
Yeah, I bet you will do.
Yeah.
You will do.
Hello,
good morning. Pop some hellos on the chat. Let us know you're there. There's two little boxes at the bottom. There should be a chat section and a Q&A section. Let us know you are there and happy and well. Good morning, good morning, good morning. So many of you. It's lovely to see you. Lots of familiar names there, as well as some that I don't recognise, which is a pleasure to have you with us. So I think we better hold on for the number to keep jumping up. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Lovely, lovely.
Somebody who can't get into Zoom on a code.
Yes, yeah, there is.
Password or something.
Yeah, that's it, that's it. We're still jumping up. If you've got any questions, guys, of course, Gavin is going to be interviewing Martin, but please do pop them into the Q&A section so that we can keep an eye on them and go through them when we can.
I see the boss has just turned up.
Yeah, we've got both. I think we've got both bosses. Oh, do I have cake, Becky, from Scott? I do, but unfortunately, Scott, I can't pass it on to you.
I never thought about cake. Cake and tea would have been absolutely perfect.
Oh, it would have been perfect. Absolutely perfect. I'm glad you know who's boss, Gavin. That's from Leslie.
Well, it's debatable sometimes, as Leslie will tell you.
Right then, we're going to get started. It is with great delight that I'm going to hand over to our lovely Gavin Prest, who is going to interview the fabulous, can't quite believe he's here, I'm still pinching myself now, but Martin Parr. Please do go ahead, guys, and get your session started.
Well, good morning, Martin. I think Becky's not the only one that's pinching herself, to be quite honest. When I heard that you were going to be on, it was an absolute honour. And to be quite honest, your back catalogue is absolutely vast. I could spend hours talking to you about this, but we have to cover a few things, and I'd like to cover a few things. So you became, the first picture, I'm just going to share my screen, Martin. The first picture is this one that I actually came across. And I just wondered, when this was written, from Grandad to Martin, hoping he will cultivate a seeing eye for all beauty of line and form of colour. And I thought that was absolutely fascinating, that little piece of paper. Do you still have this?
It must be in my archive somewhere, but just to explain, I was brought up in Surrey, which, as you know, is the home counties. And one advantage of being brought up in Surrey is the rest of the country feels very exciting, because Surrey was a bit anonymous and a bit boring. So I used to go and stay with my grandfather, who was a very keen amateur photographer. We lived in Yorkshire, just in Calverley, near Bradford. And he was a fellow of the Royal Photographic Society, a bromoil worker, in fact. But what he did do when I was very young, like 10, 11, he lent me a camera. We went out shooting together, processed the film, made prints. So by about the age of 12 or 13, I decided that I wanted to be a photographer. And this was a book that he gave me called Instructions to Young Photographers. And this is what he wrote in the book. And of course, it's a very cherished memento for me.
Absolutely, I can imagine it is, yeah. And your career is obviously, colossal in the scheme of documentary photography. Do you think, did you adapt your style as it has grown with you as you've moved down the photographic career? Have you always wanted to photograph Britain and people and this sort of thing?
I want to photograph everywhere, but inevitably, because I live in Britain, this is the country that I've photographed more extensively than anywhere else. And what's interesting about that is that I have this sort of strange relationship to Britain. It's a sort of form of love-hate at the same time. And almost photographically, I use photography as a form of therapy, if you like, to explore that apparent contradiction. So over the years, I've been aware of that to try and articulate it. but also to really try and understand and document this country. And of course, in the 50 years I've been working as a photographer, there's been massive changes. So I'm very aware of the importance of documenting change. And that's really it. No, there's another part of that question I've just missed. What was it? What didn't I answer there?
I think you answered it all, okay. Martin. But I think
right, there you go. You're easy to please, Gavin.
Oh, I'm not. People might think I'm quite deep, but I'm not that deep, to be honest. I'm not that shallow either. But I
want to be less deep than you.
I think I've got some pictures here that I did load them up, but it's loaded them up in a completely random order. So I just want to go through a few of these because your eye. Well, absolutely colossal. It's phenomenal to me because you see the things you see are all around us, and I never, a lot of people never see them. But this picture, I just had to ask you about this one.
Okay, so one thing you obviously will have noticed, this is in black and white, because until about 1982, I worked in black and white. If you're a photographer in the 70s, you're almost obliged to work in black and white. Color was the domain of commercial photographer, maybe some of the guild members, and snapshot photography. So serious photography didn't really get going in colour until the late 70s. So I moved first to Manchester to study photography there at the Polytechnic. And then in 1975, I moved to Hebden Bridge, which is in Yorkshire. Mm. And there I started to photograph the community, a bit in a way in the sense that I didn't have that community photograph when I was brought up in Surrey. And one of the things I discovered was these nonconformist chapels. And I photographed these quite extensively. I honed in on them. And some of you may know the big event in a nonconformist chapel is the anniversary day, which is the birthday of the chapel. They have two services and they have in the afternoon the anniversary tea. So this is Steep Lane Baptist Chapel. I have no idea if it's still going or not. Anniversary tea from around 1977.
Well, it's just a picture of the Last Supper in the background and this lady in the best hat and the tea and the two people framing her perfectly. It's just one of those.
One of the weird things about this, Gavin, is I know this woman will be dead. I often think when I look back at my photographs, depending on how old they are, so many of these people have gone, but here at least we have a picture of them. And many people write to me when they're shown, when I had this big show at the National Portrait Gallery last year, many people got in touch with me and say, I found my mother in your picture. And I always send people a print, a small 10/8 print or a file, because, I think that's the least you can do. So it's amazing how this happens.
There's something I'm going to come to later, because I actually found somebody I know in one of your pictures, which I'll come to a little bit later on.
Oh my God.
I know
it's really embarrassing.
Not at all. I just thought, I know that person. And it wasn't until I actually realised that, but I'll come to that. But there's another fascinating picture from this series, and it's this one.
Right. Well, this is a project I started around bad weather. This is also from West Yorkshire. And having documented the Hebden Bridge area quite extensively, I wanted to go back to something a bit more conceptual, a bit more sort of vague in terms of being less to do with narrative and more to do with a concept. And I came up with this idea of photographing bad weather. We're obsessed with weather in this country. We talk about it constantly. You well know that if you walk out this morning and here it is a beautiful sunny day, although at the moment there's no great story saying it's another sunny day, because there's sunny days all the time at the moment.
We haven't actually covered the weather in yet. So we'll come to that.
No, not yet. Yes, but this is a project. This is the 1977 Silver Jubilee, a washed out street party, and it's one of the first pictures I took around this idea of bad weather. So when the weather was bad, I would go out and photograph extensively, and when the weather was less good, I would carry on doing my other things as well. But I made it a point, and I produced my first book that I ever had published was actually called Bad Weather. And this is one of the pictures from that.
I think it's just fascinating, the whole image itself. You've got the industrial heritage almost with the chimneys and the factories in the background. But it's absolutely biblical rain looking at the puddles.
It is, yeah. Well, you can see actually the tea, the anniversary tea, is somewhat protected. There's a roof over it, although we don't see it in the picture. And you can see beyond that, that's where it's really lashing down. But you can see, of course, the tablecloths being blown around, which does indicate the...
That's what puzzled me, because I didn't get the idea that roof was there. And I was thinking, why would everybody just leave everything outside? The pork pies are there.
Well, there you go. You see, all photographs are live. Remember that.
And there's this
personal lies. That's the important thing.
There's this one. Oh, hang on, I'm on the wrong screen. This one here, again, which is I find fascinating. There's the guy in his suit, in his hat, and he's cleaning the windows.
Yeah,
there's another picture, and he's just stood there on one leg, obviously.
I know. Well, this
it's
is
just the composition of this picture is just how, you know, the fact that you're there when this guy's doing this is it's just brilliant.
You feel you could take the stepladder away and he'd still be standing there.
I don't know what health and safety would have to say about this.
This is a good example. Exactly, yeah. This is in Hebden Bridge, of course, where I was living in the late 70s. And this is an example. I think his daughter got in touch with me and said, "Oh, that's my dad on the stepladder." And of course, I sent her a print. So it's another example of someone being spotted by a member of that family.
Does that happen quite a lot? Do people come back to you and say, "That's my..."
It does, yeah. No, I mean, it does when you have, as I say, these high-profile shows in particular, like the NPG. You're very likely to find people who will see someone they know, or even themselves. You know, that does happen occasionally. Because often I would take the photographs that I take back to the place where they were taken, or in the vicinity. So I did a big show in Hepworth, in Wakefield, about the rhubarb triangle. I don't know if you know about this. Is the area in the UK where rhubarb is grown, forced rhubarb, and I did a whole project around this. And of course, inevitably, a lot of the, you know, all the farmers that I photographed were invited to the show, and of course, many other people saw the photographs of people they knew, and they all got their print.
This is another one that I find interesting in the fact that, you know, the lights on and everybody had really clean steps in those days and came out and polished it.
That's a good example of potential OCD.
And they've only cleaned the path to the actual boundary of their house.
Yeah, to the barrier of their house. Yeah, we're not going to mess about and do other people's, are we?
It's almost current, isn't it? Well, it's all this "I'm all right, Jack, and I'm not looking after my neighbours" sort of attitude that a lot of people have these days. And this is even in those days, is, well, I'm not cleaning Mavis's step from next door. She can clean her own bloody step, you know.
Yeah.
And then another fascinating image. Just got a point you raised earlier, you know, how things have changed with time and the current, not just the current situation we're in with this pandemic, but how would you feel now about the media and censorship and we're not allowed to take these pictures and we can take these pictures and so on? So how do you find that?
What do you mean? What censorship are we talking about?
Well, I mean, like social media censors images and you're not allowed to show.
Well, yeah.
You
you're not allowed to put nude pictures. You can't put breasts up and things like that, as you well know.
But you can't go into you can't go into like shopping arcades and photograph and things like that these days. You know, we have some around us and the guys in the yellow jackets will come up.
Well, there are ways of getting around that. Either you can get permission or you can just sneak pictures, you know. I mean, I'm not going to try and stop myself photographing because the technical rules are that you can't. I mean, I've photographed in many McDonald's over the years, for example, and supermarkets. Very rare if I had permission, I've just gone in and photographed.
And it doesn't cause you
I don't worry about it.
It doesn't cause you problems afterwards then?
Well, I mean, it is probably getting more difficult to photograph, you know, as time progresses. But at the moment, you know, you are in a public place. You're allowed to take anything you want. I mean, technically in a private place, such as a supermarket. But I've never had, for example, a photograph taken in a supermarket where the supermarket's come to me and said, "You can't use that." So I basically ignore it and just get on with it.
I mean, there's a picture in here as well of this. I think this is a fantastic ice. Well, see, it's almost like this bubble car's got a Mohican.
Yes.
You know, with the tree. That's the first
the
thing
reason why this is framed and showed is because, you know, I have a foundation, which I know we're going to talk about later, but I will just mention this, that if you become the second tier of a foundation member, we have a very good membership scheme and quite an active one. You get this signed Martin Parr print, and this is the particular print you get this year. And this is an early black and white picture taken in around the West Yorkshire area, and you know, it's become quite an iconic picture. So it's your way. It's the cheapest way of buying a Martin Parr print, because I think their membership is like 120 or something. And as Rebecca's going to explain later, we've actually got a deal for Guild members where they can join and get a 10% discount if they join before the end of Sunday night.
I
so
have.
You actually get this print for about 100 quid.
So the link, guys, I have posted in the chat section. You'll be able to see if you go to Martin's website, which we'll talk about later. You can save 10% using the discount code PhotoGuild.
What I want to ask as well, Martin, is when you start a project, do you research it at all, or do you just go out and just think, I'm going to photograph this and let's have a look and see what I find?
Well, there are two types of projects that I do. First, there are self-initiated ones, which generally, I have a theme and an idea which I accumulate pictures around. And then I do what's called cultural commissions. I mean, previously I used to do a lot more editorial assignments, but as we all know, the editorial market is really difficult these days. No one's got any money, especially in the print business. So what you still can get is, for example, a cultural commission. So I've done these with many museums, and what they do is they give you a sum of money and they say, would you now come to the area and produce an exhibition around things within our area, which will be shown at our gallery, often in time, often, for example, with another set of work of mine. So it would be like a small retrospective, but with a particular emphasis on the new pictures taken, for example, in Manchester, like in about 18 months ago, I did a big show at Manchester Art Gallery. And they invited me to come to Manchester. And the interesting thing for Manchester, for me, was I went there as a student and I photographed extensively there in the 70s and 80s. So I was able to come back and catch up with how Manchester had changed so dramatically and show these new set of pictures in conjunction with the pictures I'd taken with the older set of pictures about Manchester.
Do you ever come to the decision, well, when you're going to finish a project? I mean, that must be fairly awkward if you're, do you still get a buzz when you're taking the pictures? I know when people create images and they see them on the back of the camera and they're like, oh, wow. And then you're doing a whole piece, which is a series of images. How do you know when it's finished?
Well, I mean, sometimes some projects just keep on going. I mean, I have certain projects that I keep coming back to. I photograph beaches. I've done a lot of work around tourism. I mean, my main subject matter is the leisure pursuits of the Western world. And of course, photographing in the UK. So, eventually I will do more pictures or more books about Britain. I'm about to do, for example, this year I'm publishing a book about Ireland. Now, I've been to Ireland over a period of 40 years. I went and shot in black and white in 1979. I went back last year, self-initiated in this particular instance, and photographed the sort of trendy scene of the new companies. I went to a gay wedding in Ireland. So I was catching up with, if you like, the dramatic changes that we've seen in Ireland in this 40-year period, perhaps more so than certainly the rest of the UK. Not that Ireland's in the UK, of course, but the change there has been much more dramatic. So that will come out as a book. Now, in between 1979 and 2019, I've been going to Ireland regularly. So those pictures go into my archive and I can then call upon that archive to put a set of pictures together and produce a book. And remember, I've done over 100 books. So these pictures go into the archive. And if someone said to me, can you do a book about dogs next week? I would say, yes, I've got, 500 pictures with dogs in. How many do you want?
I mean, you're very famous for your colour these days, and your bright colours and using, I wasn't going to talk about cameras, to be honest, but when you shoot, lots of documentary photographers like to be discreet. Now, I remember I read a comment where you use a ring flash to saturate the colours and things like this to get to this particular. That must give you quite a big chunk of camera in your hand with a flash on.
It does. It does. No, so there are three types of cameras I use. I mean, this particular picture we're looking at on the screen is actually done under telephoto, and that's something I've explored quite recently in the last 5 years or so. What I wanted to do is to take the telephoto camera lens and actually apply that to documentary photographing on beaches, not something that most people usually end up doing. So this is on a 300mm, and this is the full extension of that. It's on the beach at Tenby, and it's a classic example of cues. One of the things I'm doing at the moment, by the way, is photographing the new type of cue that we have, which is spaced out, very messy. Sometimes you see a cue, you don't even know where the beginning or the end is. So in a sense, one of the things that's definitely changing that I'm aware of photographing is cues. Yeah. But coming back to your point, the macro lens, which I still often use, especially for food, less so with people at the moment, I guess, although I have done many bodies of work around the macro lens coming right up close. But generally speaking, you know, I have a Canon with a Canon 5D with a 2470 on. That's my sort of main lens, and that's what I can go out and shoot most things on.
I mean, a lot of these
this is from The Last Resort. This is the first project I did in color, and this started in 1982, and I was living in the Wirral, and just down the road was this rather rundown seaside resort called New Brighton. And they just introduced this new 6x7 camera called a Plough-Bell. And I went down and started photographing this, got very excited, combined it with flash and daylight, and over a period of 3 years accumulated these pictures, which became The Last Resort, which is probably still my best known body of work, in fact.
It's interesting because, I mean, the last band I played in, there's a picture in here that I can associate with from those days, was called The Last Resort. And it's obviously based around Hornsey, which I know you mentioned when we spoke earlier in the week about Scarborough and doing lots of work in Scarborough, which is only about 40 miles up the road from us. So we live on that stretch of coastline, which is not dissimilar to this, to be quite honest. And as of last week,
well, I think the beach at Scarborough is a bit better. This is the beach at New Brighton. I mean, I'd say the beach at Scarborough is a bit better.
Yeah, it's a lovely beach. We do have a nice south beach here, but everybody tends to go north.
Well, as you know, I'm a great Scarborough fan, so you don't need to convince me.
Well, I'll make you for a cup of tea there next time you're over. There's another picture in here, which I obviously think just is a brilliant image. I'm guessing this is Russia.
It is indeed, St. Petersburg. Yeah, yeah.
Because to me, I'm just looking at this picture, and obviously there's a lot going on in it, but it's the guy in his speedos, but he's still got his shoes and socks on. The lady's got her socks on, facing the wall. It looks like she's asleep, standing up. And then the lady at the end, who must be absolutely red hot, with a woolly hat and a big coat on. And there's so many different things in this that you just go, what on earth is going on here? You know.
Well, one of the things you may know about Russia is they sunbathe standing up, which
I didn't know that, actually.
It's a bit of a gift. And you know, this is basically, it's quite cold here. You can see there's ice on the floor, but in fact they still will sunbathe. You know, they'll grab every bit of sunshine they can, and obviously it's quite sheltered here. But you can see the real mean temperature is probably better expressed with the woman's coat on the right hand side.
I didn't realise that. Now that makes a lot more sense now. But I didn't realise the Russians sunbathed stood up.
Well, there you go. You've learned something today.
I have learned something very different today. I never thought that would be the outcome of this conversation. The one thing you've learned today, if somebody says, Gav, what have you learned today about photography? Well, do you know what? The Russians sunbathe standing up. Did you find working in Russia a little bit different then? I mean...
Oh yeah, I mean, I was professor of photography at Helsinki University in let me think, the late 80s, early 90s, and I used to regularly go to St. Petersburg on the train for a long weekend and shoot there. And it was just at the time when communism was falling, and it was still, you know, Gorbachev was in as the president, but it still looked very sort of dated. And I photographed extensively in Russia and indeed in Estonia. I used to go to Tallinn as well for the weekend. So I took full advantage of that time in Russia and in the Baltic countries as well. So
you've got a lot of these sort of self-portraits.
Exactly. Well, this is a project I've done called Auto Portrait, which is something I've done over maybe a period of 35 years. And this is where I've gone out and celebrated the different ways in which you can get your photograph taken in both commercial studios. Some of the people that will be listening today will be aware of this, and also where you have photographs taken on the street. And this is in that period of time, of course, that 35 years, two things have really happened. First, I've got a lot older, and I've had to use myself as the main model because I was the only person who was consistently there. And you couldn't go into a studio and say, I'd like to buy some picture there of some stranger. They wouldn't sell it to you. And also we've changed from analog to digital. And this is an early digital picture. And the point of this really is suddenly you can be with anyone, anywhere you like, with doing anything. And that's what digital technology can provide so effectively. So here we are in Ukraine with me and Putin, my mate Putin.
Would you quite fancy photographing Putin, and would that be something you'd?
Well, of course, yeah, I wouldn't mind doing that, but I don't think that's going to happen unless you've got some high contacts there in in the Russian embassy, Gavin?
No, unfortunately not. Not many contacts in Russia, to be honest. And I think the FSO, they call it now, would probably be coming down. I just found this was a fascinating picture to have Putin in it. Going back to some of these other images, you know, there's so many current images that are now. We spoke about this one a little bit earlier, and this is fascinating. The fact that this, you know, this is when was this? Is this the 80s?
This is, I think, late 90s, and this is, as you have already mentioned, this is Auchan supermarket in Calais, and this is when the Brits were coming over, buying up cheap alcohol in France, and it was, you know, scrum scenes, very similar to the scrum scenes we saw just at the beginning of the lockdown. So, yeah, I mean, the desperation to get as much of this Stella Artois into your trolley was pretty intense. It's
exactly why I put this picture in, is because the only thing that's changed is the product, and it would probably be toilet rolls now.
Exactly, yeah.
You know, rather than create a Stella, you know.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, we haven't learned, we haven't moved on. I mean, I don't know if anybody's watching TV last night that's viewing today. There was I mentioned it, Don McCullum was on an interview about, you know, his old past work, saying, you know, the last 50 years, basically, he was asked, what do you think to your last 50 years work? And he replied in the fact that it's been, in his opinion, a waste of time, because nobody's listened and nobody's taken any heed of his images, and a war stops and another one starts. You know, looking back at this, it's now current again. Where do you feel your photography lies? I mean, a huge archive, a historic archive as well.
Well, I think that's the main legacy, if you like, is this whole idea of the archive that I've built up, you know. But I mean, Don aspires, in one sense, if he says he's let himself down, it's because he aspires to change the world through taking and recording of war. Now, that's not something I've done. I mean, unless you call this a war. In the
some people might view it as a war, I think.
Yeah, I would never go to a conflict zone. It's just not in my DNA, you know.
There was a question I was going to ask you. Would you fancy going over to a conflict zone?
No way. I like to sit down at night and have a nice glass of wine and something to eat, you know. And plenty of my colleagues in Magnum go to wars, and they do it incredibly effectively. So that's not my cup of tea at all. I prefer a cup of tea because I'm English.
You're British, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah, of course
it's
we do,
the one thing we're very good at, you know. Radio 4 and a cup of tea. When I think about it.
I will just bring. On that, sorry, on that note, I'll bring this picture up because this is about as British as it gets.
There you go. So one of the things I like to photograph, Gavin, are cliches. And for me, this is the perfect cup of tea on a perfect gingham tablecloth. This is done with a macro. You can see the lighting around the thing.
Yeah.
And I often start my projects around cliches and build around that. Now, most photographers often say, oh, the one thing you've got to not do is cliches. But I love cliches, you know, because cliches are true, or have a sort of element of truth to them for one reason, because they are generally true.
But
so yeah, that's a good example of that.
Even this simple teacup on a you know, on the tablecloth, it tells so much about it. It says so much, you know, about where it was taken. It could have been wrong, but it isn't. It's just so British.
It could have been Swansea.
It could well be, you know, you could have been some. I tell you what, I can probably point you in the line of some cafes that still have tablecloths like this.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm jumping all over the place with these pictures because it's where to start. This is again.
Well, there's another one on the macro, and I think this is pretty self-explanatory. This is in West Bay in Dorset, and as we well know, seagulls are great scavengers, and here they are helping themselves to an abandoned portion of chips.
It's just, I mean, I'm going to diversify here and go on to a film that you made called Think of England. I'm not going to show it because I don't think Zoom transfers film very well.
Well, if anyone goes onto my site, for example, which is obviously, well, not obviously, it's martinparr.com, and go to the film section, you can see clips of the films that I've made, including Think of England. So they're all there for the taking if anyone's interested.
One of the questions that arose, I'm just going to show this image, for example. One of the questions that arose, it's about, in the one I watched, was about the country fair and the pie judging.
Yes.
And one of the things I wanted to ask you is, do you mind confrontation with the people in your pictures? Well, I think you actually thrive on the confrontation and the communication and asking them questions. But the judge in the pie section, you'll have to go and watch this video because it made me funny. But that lady that's with her, and when you question the pie, well, that wouldn't win if it was in the shop window because it doesn't look particularly picturesque, so to speak. She won it, and she's a friend of the judge. Did you think that was a little bit of a fix?
Well, I mean, I love that. I mean, obviously, when I'm out photographing, and in this particular case, filming, I try and make my questions a little bit mischievous because I want to draw people out. And that was a very good example that actually worked. Sometimes it doesn't work, and sometimes it does. So that's just one of those great moments where you think, wow, that's brilliant that she had actually won the competition, and she was a bit snotty about that to me. And it made the film, made that little clip.
When she comes up at the end and in front of your camera and that, she says, well, I heard what you said about my pie. And then she just walks off laughing. And I just thought that is brilliant. And then the chappie who's drinking the wine, and looks like he's just on a free bar, doesn't he? There's only one contestant, I think. It's fantastic. Did you find the change from stills to film difficult, or?
I love making films. It's very time consuming, really. So ultimately, I've made my selection and I want to be a photographer more than a filmmaker. But I did do recently, the ones, the idents, the BBC idents. I don't know if people are aware of this. They've just changed them at the moment for the pandemic. I don't know if they'll come back. But in fact, if you go up, Gavin, if you go to the, you can see, you go to the picture here, the Newcastle, yeah?
Yes.
So that's one of the ident pictures.
Well, this is the one that's got one of my friends in.
Has it? Oh, great. Yeah. There you go. Well, this is obviously Newcastle, as you know. And this is a Sausage Dog Walking Club, I believe, if I remember correctly. And I mean, the funny thing is, although I'm not a filmmaker, up till about 3 weeks ago, I used to have 50 films a day shown on BBC One, which is pretty good going, really. And what I would do is a still picture, and then we'd make a 30-second ident where basically they came together in the first 5 seconds, maybe 4 seconds in, and did a portrait, and then they'd have some activity. And some of the people may have seen this particular ident on the television, where after the portrait, which is very similar to the still, they all go off and talk to each other and go round. And but very rarely in the actual screening of the ident would you go much beyond, say, 10, 12 seconds.
Yeah. The lady at the back,
actually 30 seconds long.
The lady at the back left with the like mustard trousers and the white shirt on is somebody I actually know called Kat Saltberg.
Right.
Saltburn,
well,
sorry,
I think
Saltburn.
all the members who participated in this shoot would have got a print. So I hope she's got one.
Oh, I'll ask her and see.
Yeah,
I don't know if you know she's been included in today's talk.
Well, there you go.
This picture rings a personal bell with me because when I left school in the sort of late 70s and punk was sort of...
Were you a punk, Gavin?
Originally, yeah. And this picture reminds me of something my father once said to me and my mother, because obviously I had quite radical haircuts and fashion sense. And my dad once said, son, if you're walking down the street and you're coming towards me, I will cross the road when you don't know looking like that. And this picture just rang such a bell, and I thought, I can relate to that.
Now, have you got a picture of you as a punk? I'd like to see it.
I haven't got one handy. I'll ask I'm sure my mother's got lots in the archives that she's saying. If she's watching this, Mum, I'm sure it'll come through in a minute on some social media. But yeah, my dad wasn't particularly amused, I don't think. But what's this picture here then? What's the actual?
Well, it's literally a mother and daughter, and it's just one of those moments that you catch, and you think, "Wow, that was a piece of luck." Yeah. And there you go. I mean, I think it says it all, really, doesn't it? Yeah. You don't need a caption here, although if it says mother and daughter, it does help.
Yeah, I just related to it straight away in the haircut and the self-expression. Another one that I related to is the guy drumming from your dance book. This guy here, I used to play in a band, and we used to play the clubs of the Northeast and Hull and area, and I was the drummer sitting in the back, and I can totally relate to this picture.
Yeah,
I once spoke during the Link Bingo, and we nearly got lynched. I didn't realise just how important bingo was, but this dance series, this book, some of them are fascinating pictures. I'm going to have to ask you what is going on some of them.
Well, this is a working men's club in Newcastle, and this is interestingly a very early digital picture. when they introduced the first 5D. Can't remember what it was. Yeah, I think it was just a basic 5D. And here we've got a bit of flash on the couple. And the breakthrough for me with digital was, you know, I photograph a lot at night, and then being able to control the ISO, being able to work on T as opposed to, say, program or manual, and to have a slightly longer exposure, and then to bring in the ambient light, you know, because you can pump up the ISO, so the ambient light would balance with the flash, you know, and I use a typical sort of, you know, diffuser like a Gary Fong on top of the camera, and it just gave me incredible ability to really dramatically improve the pictures taken at night of dancing. If you go to that one of the, I know you've got it in the main screen here, Gavin. If you just pop the screen on again, yeah, the one of the, go up a bit.
That's the top.
Oh, that's the top. So, well, see the one next to the couple that you just saw.
So look, the one that's
so
on...
yeah, see where the couple is in Newcastle.
Oh yeah, this one here.
To the left. I mean, that's a good example where this is at the Balmoral Ball in London, where again you've got a little bit of flash on the gun. But if you do that previously, say with 400 ISO, which is what I was using consistently when I was using analog, you know, the background would go dark. So I have the ability here to control the relationship between the foreground and the background, because I want to keep that atmosphere of actually being in the ballroom.
It's such a difference in class. This is almost like a Jane Austen novel, isn't it? You know, with the soldier kissing the lady's hand and things like that. And then you go from that to this. You know, what's this one?
Well, this is Notting Hill Carnival. And you may have seen this. They have some pretty exotic dancing, at the least. And that's really a good example of that, you know.
I mean,
are you saying that this may have been censored by Facebook or Instagram or whatever?
Yeah. But, you know, you look at this and you look at the obvious things, but then you notice all the other things going on. Like the guy at the back with the balloon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Almost chasing the balloon, and the hand in the bottom right-hand corner and things. There's all these little details that, you know, the shopping bag on the floor.
The other thing you've got to remember, Gavin, is most of the pictures I take are failures, and they're not very good. You know, I just want to sort of, you know, basically ensure people understand that you know, that our failure rate is massive, okay? But what you do hope for is that occasional moment where just things fall right, you know, and it doesn't happen often. And there's no shortcuts to taking these great iconic pictures. And if I get 6 to 10 a year, I'd say that's been a great year. You have to keep taking the bad pictures. This is Bar Mitzvah, and what's interesting about this picture is you see here I'm on a slower shutter speed, so it's like 15th probably, and that with the flash has caught this, and of course it's just highlighted the guy's glasses, the pink hat and the green hat, and you've got that sort of slightly out of focus backdrop, but it gives it the atmosphere of what it was like for the crazy dancing you might see at a Bar Mitzvah.
I had to ask what was going on there because it's very, obviously suits you to a T, the colours and things, but I wouldn't have guessed that's what it actually was, to be fair.
Yeah,
but
and this is actually done, interestingly, this is actually done for a Kodak commercial job.
Oh, wow.
That I did, I think, 2 years ago. So it's often the case where the actual work I get commissioned to do from companies like, in this particular case, Kodak, can actually become part of my own work as well. Because the reason why people come to you, of course, is because you have got a very distinctive style, almost like a vision. Oh, this is a picture I was after. Yeah, so people come to you because they want a Martin Parr picture, and that, when I'm doing commercial assignments, is exactly what I do, and therefore I can often use them for my own folio as well.
Right. This is another interesting picture because there's, again, loads going on, but I'm curious to how it was for you in there.
It was pretty hot and sweaty, although I did have my shirt on, I have to say. And this is Whitby Goth weekend. And this is New Order playing on the band. You're old enough, Gavin, to know who New Order are.
Absolutely, yeah.
And this is a good example, again, with the... So this has been shot on something like f2.8, if you can believe that. With on a 30th of a second. And again, what you've got here is you've retained the atmosphere of what the place would be like with the background of the band playing and all these guys stripping off. So there's a bit of movement in there, but just enough to sort of really feel the sort of energy of the dance floor.
Well, it's the energy of the dance floor and almost quite scary as well. I was looking at that. It's not, you know, somewhere to be I wonder where it ended up and how else to control
one of the things
it.
I would say, I mean, if there's any sort of wedding photographers on the call here, you know, I mean, I love photographing weddings, and what always surprises me is that often the photographer will leave after the first dance. To me, that's the time when it just gets going, because people dancing and the whole atmosphere, dad dancing makes great pictures. And again, I would use this technique of combining the ambient light with a little bit of you know, diffuser light to get that atmosphere of what it's like for the dancing scenes.
I have heard a few wedding photographers mention that fact, that they like to stay until it kicks off and everybody's had a few sherbets and things like that, and it all gets a bit more interesting. What's this one, Martin? This is a Lord Mayor's Parade,
and this is a commission I managed to get via the Guildhall in London to actually photograph the city of London. You know, I photographed the livery companies, I photographed the Lord Mayor. I went to, you know, the liveries are an amazing sort of set of secret societies in London with these wonderful halls. And this is just the Lord Mayor's Parade, in fact, so it's part of that particular series.
He obviously looks very proud, this gentleman, and I don't recognise the tie, to be honest, but it looks like almost a regimental tie.
Yeah, and
you know,
rather a lot of badges.
Say again, sorry?
Rather a lot of badges.
Yeah, I've got lots of badges, but not a strip of medals. But I'm just fascinated, you know, his attitude, the way he's standing, he's absolutely on edge. And, you know, I just found that a very interesting picture. I mean, there's so many we could go on for. Talking about
this is interesting. Yeah, go to that picture there with the red and blue guy.
This one.
So, as you know, I run the Martin Parr Foundation, and one of the things we do as a fundraiser is that over a weekend we do 100 portraits, and so we bring in a studio flash, we get a backdrop, and we basically charge £250 for each person, and they get a signed 11 by 14 print in exchange for that. People come in, we do 50 a day, so it takes about 10 minutes. I'll take about 30 pictures of each couple or family, whatever it is. And they would then sit down with a member of my staff and go through the pictures and make their selection. And they often choose, you know, one picture, but sometimes they'll actually select more. So I'd say in the end, we probably take double what we take on the basic 250 because people order extra prints. And all the money and all the profit from this goes towards the foundation. So basically, like many of your viewers, I'm a high street photographer, but I only do it every 15 months or so. We were going to do one in April, but we had to postpone it, of course, so we're doing it now in October.
And they dress themselves, I presume.
Yeah, well, sometimes people come with their pets, with their animals, with their families, and in this particular case, that couple here in the red and blue costumes. Yeah. So, like some of your members, I'm actually a portrait studio photographer as well. Here's another example where someone's come in with their homegrown marrow.
I remember an actor called Rutger Hauer once did a commercial for Guinness, I think it was, about, and I remember the punchline, you know, Edward Waring had won the marrow competition for the last 20 years, and this new kid on the block walked in with the biggest vegetable anybody had ever seen, and it goes on and on and on, and in the end the punchline is, the newcomer just says, "Can anybody tell me who's judging the cucumbers, please? Because his cucumber's even bigger than the marrow." I remember it really well. It's a fantastic advert. You know, where do we stop with this? Vivienne Westwood. This is another interesting portrait of Vivienne.
Yeah, this is a commercial assignment for a magazine, and in fact, when I did my National Portrait Gallery show last year, I actually had a room full of celebrity portraits, because that's the sort of thing you normally expect to see at the NPG. And over the years, I'd accumulated quite a lot from doing assignments and editorial things. So this is actually not published at the time because the magazine rejected it. They used another picture instead, but this, for me, was the best picture. So it's a good opportunity to dress it down and put it into the show.
I know your foundation. I'd like to talk about. I've got some pictures here of the foundation. And it's your strive to preserve the archive of British photographers.
Indeed. So we're based in Bristol. We're in Paintworks, and next door to us is the newly opened Royal Photographic Society Museum. So you basically can go to the same location and get to see two museums. And we do 5 shows a year. We particularly look at British photographers, British documentary photographers. We like to show them. either emerging talent or indeed recontextualizing some of the great names in British photography, like people like Chris Killip. If you look, when you talk to me directly, you can see behind me a Chris Killip picture here hanging on the wall. And we have a big archive. We have a whole collection with a temperature controlled room. We have a membership scheme, which gives people the ability to come in and look at the collection, get a guided tour. We have special events for the members. And they get 10% off in the bookshop, which we have quite a big selection of. And this particular show is Ian Weldon, who is a wedding photographer who's very good, and he takes weddings in a very journalistic style. And in fact, his strapline is, "I'm not a wedding photographer," but of course, really he is. But he's someone I came across. I was in Barcelona, in fact, doing a talk. And when I got there, what I hadn't realized is that this was a conference of wedding photographers. And so I talked about this, and then someone said to me, "Well, have you seen the work of Ian Weldon?" And he turns out to be a brilliant photographer. He lives in Newcastle. So if you go to his site, ianweldon.com, you can look at some of his pictures. And we showed his work, and it really had amazing response. You know, it was one of the most popular shows we've ever done. And he photographs weddings in a way that I've never seen photographed really before or after, because he just shows it as it is, you know. And I think this whole trend, as we all know, towards a more sort of candid style in weddings is something that's gaining a lot of steam, and he's probably at the vanguard of that particular trend.
We've got a few questions which I'm so fascinated with the chat. A question from Lewis: with your stature as one of the greatest photographers from the UK, do you feel that clients give you creative freedom when you take on commissioned work in comparison to your personal work? Or do you often have to find a common ground to work on?
I mean, with commercial work, I mean, there is a certain amount of freedom, but at the same time, you know, you've got a problem to solve through photography, and often it's a product thing. So I often do a lot of work for Gucci, and I've done the whole Gucci beauty campaign, and there the sort of demands are quite strict. But when I've done more relaxed type of Gucci work, when I've done the lookbook and showing models, they all just let me go off and do my own thing at the same time. So it's a combination of having to basically supply the shot that's being required for commercial purposes, but also keeping and ensuring that my personality and my vision is still, you know, to be seen in the photographs. So they'll allow you to go off piste, if you like, and experiment and do things around that.
Well, one of the whole reasons that they've asked you to do it is because of you, isn't it? You know,
yeah, they want a Martin Parr photo. So exactly. If they did restrict me, it would be self-defeating.
Yeah, absolutely. Tarek here. What is your approach to avoid confrontation with a stranger after photographing them? Ever got into a fight because of a photo?
Many. Fear not. Do not think I'm exempt from that. No, of course, you know, you do get into arguments, you know, but I'm also pretty good at disguising what I'm photographing. For example, if I'm photographing a particular person, say sat on a bench, I will not be pointing my body towards that person. I'll be looking somewhere elsewise, you know, maybe 45 degrees to the right or left. And then I'll be looking through the corner of my eye, swing around, take the picture, and then move on. But then I'm often at a do like a wedding or you know, a fashion show or an art gallery opening where there's lots of photographers. You know, I've got a big camera, I've got a big flash. I just brazen my way in there and shoot it. But of course, you do have problems, and you know, it's an occupational hazard, and you can't let it intimidate you. Otherwise, you wouldn't get any pictures done. You just have to deal with it as you go along. There's
another question. You use the center of the frame as a position of power and importance in a lot of your images. Is this deliberate when you frame the images, a practical approach for capturing the important moments as a documentary photographer, or something that you add in cropping to develop the images, or when developing the images?
I mean, I don't always center the thing in the middle of the frame. I mean, sometimes I'm aware that when you're photographing, you know, you're photographing the whole scene, and you're making sure that the subject is partly shown, and it's a relationship between the main subject or the main components and the rest of the frame, which is very important. So, I mean, there aren't really rules in that sense, but, you know, when I'm doing portraits, I tend to be pretty central. You know, I want to show that sort of presence. You know, presence in photography is something which is very important. You know, making sure that when you're doing a portrait, there's usually clarity behind the head you've got it in a white space, you know, so you can actually see what's going on. You know, things like that I'm aware, and they're just almost intuitive things that I just work with as I go along.
Mm. We've got quite a few questions, so I'll get through as many as I can. As a young photographer, I show my projects to friends and family, and they interpreted the images in an entirely different way to what I intended, which is pretty interesting, but isn't very practical when one is trying to express themselves. My question is, whether it's single shots or image sequences, how does a photographer make sure the viewer understands the theme and emotions he intends in the photographs?
Well, I think ultimately it's a project and a string of pictures which we're really after. If you think of the great landmarks in photography, say from the the 20th century, it's going to be projects like The Americans by Robert Frank, or Bill Brandt's The English at Home. And inevitably, although there are key iconic pictures, it's also the cumulative effect of these pictures and the whole group of pictures together, which is really important. So I think you can't really judge a photographer on one picture, really. Although I know you have Picture of the Month at the Guild, you know, I would want to see at least, half a dozen pictures where the relationship between the photographer and the world out there is better articulated and clearer. And all the complex nature of that relationship would have time to sort of show itself.
Yeah, one of my questions earlier, which I haven't actually got to, was do you think every image should tell a story, or do you think it works better as a combined set, which you've just said?
I mean, I'm not, of course, you can single out an icon, and that can indeed have a sort of punchline to it and a story. You need some bit of tension or some kind of ambiguity to really hang a good picture around.
Somebody's asked Vicky, talking of the punk photo, Martin, I spotted you at a recent charity gig taking shots of the crowd watching the band Idols.
Oh, yes.
It was quite a chaotic situation, and I can imagine it could feel quite confrontational. Did it feel like that, or is there something that overrides that uncertainty of fear you might have had when taking the pictures in general, if I made that last bit make sense?
Well, I mean, the Idols are a very hot band in Bristol, which is where I live, of course. And, when people go and see them, because they got a lot of punk in them, it's a pretty punky audience, so, and of course the energy that punk show, as you well remember, Gavin, yourself.
It was messy, let's put it that way, it was messy.
And quite compelling. So it just sort of solved itself insofar that energy responding to a great band like the Idols makes great photographs.
Somebody's actually asked you still have a collection of Spice Girls things.
Yes, I did indeed collect Spice. I've gone off the Spice Girls, I have to say. So other things took over, like Space Dog ephemera. So sorry to disappoint, the Spice Girls have taken the back seat.
That was Steve Skinner. I do actually know Steve Skinner. He teaches photography at the local school.
Well, he's obviously pretty knowledgeable. Good on you, Steve. Thank you.
And the last question, have you ever surprised yourself, as in take an image, look at the back of the camera, don't like it, but then when you get back to the computer, your fresh eyes make you like it, and you remember why you took it, and it turns out to be amazing?
I dream of moments like this, by the way. So, I mean, it does happen, but not often. I think normally when you're onto something good, and you remember what we're talking about here is being able to articulate your relationship to the world out there through photographs, and then suddenly something starts happening. And I think, generally speaking, when you're onto a good shot. And it's always comforting to see when you look at the back of the camera to check that it's actually does transpire into that. So sometimes, I mean, recently I've been going, because we've had the lockdown, I've been going through some of my old contact prints from the 80s. And there I've been pulling out pictures which I didn't really select at the first instance. And one of the reasons for that, of course, is all the fashions have changed, how people look have changed, the hair's changed. And something you may think is pretty boring then can become a lot more interesting. So that's one of the great benefits of documentary photography. Things can actually get better with time.
I think that's an interesting point, because I mean, I think we all, myself included, can go back over our archives of work and pull out pictures that didn't make the grade initially. And all of a sudden they just come back to life for some reason. I don't know if it's your mindset that changes, or you're just pre-focused on the images you did get that were current at the time. Another question, what is your thought process behind making a book or doing a photo story? How do you make it important and meaningful to viewers contextually?
Well, you have to accumulate your pictures, and then you have to find a narrative through those pictures to sort of really tell the story that you want to put across, with all the complexities that we've talked about previously that come with producing a book of pictures rather than, say, one picture. And that's really it. And I often work with the editors, and we will start doing a narrative. We'll make the selection. We'll bring down, say, the selection from, say, 200 to 80 pictures, which is a good number for a book, and then try and assemble a narrative where it starts to unfold. And that process can take many, many months, and sometimes it can be a lot quicker.
Do the publishers come to you, or do you find the publishers?
A bit of both, really. I'm very promiscuous when it comes to publishers, because I have many publishers I would fall on. So my bigger books, the more mainstream books, I do with Phaidon, who have great global distribution. But then I'll often do a book with a smaller publisher. If you can put this, I'm just going to go and get a book which I'd like to show people. If you can put the screen onto me in a minute.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm here. Can you just bung the screen up?
Yeah. Hang on. I'm just going to. You want me to share the screen, or are you just going to hold it up to the camera?
Well, just share the screen so I can. I'm very small at the moment, aren't I?
I think Becky's actually in charge of sharing screens. So.
No, when you talk now, guys, you should just come up as full screen. If somebody can
Okay.
that for me, as soon as Martin will talk, it should just be Martin showing.
Right. Can you see me? I can just see the G of Guild.
I can see you, Martin.
You can, right, great. Okay, so here's a book that's just come out called Death by Selfie, and this is done by a small Japanese publisher. We only did 1,000 copies. And of course, the selfie is a real phenomenon of the modern times we live in. And if I was to ask you, where do you think more selfies are taken in the planet, which country, than anywhere else in the world? Where would you think, Gavin?
India.
Correct.
Oh, wow.
Well done. I have your pub quiz team anytime.
I don't know why that came into my head, it just did.
Yeah. Anyway, if you go to Wikipedia and look at the death by selfie statistics, you'll find that India is up there at the top. And because they got 1.3 billion people, and because I've been to India many times and they're constantly taking selfies, I just assumed that more selfies were taken there than anywhere. So I've accumulated these pictures, and you can see the book is actually in the shape of an iPhone.
That's
and then you
brilliant.
can open it up. And there, for example, is a picture on the beach in Mumbai.
I've actually got that picture up in my little list of pictures to show.
Hong Kong. And then the pages open up. So I like playing with different ways in which we can make these books function and come alive. So the actual production value is often reflected. Here's a good one of a guy on the beach in Goa. And
one
so
thing
it goes
that
on.
fascinated me about these the selfie series is that you're very skilled at capturing humans not interacting with each other. You have a picture of 30 people and everybody's looking in a different direction.
I've been doing it for a while now. By the way, here's a wedding photographer, wedding couple taking their own picture. This is a threat to the guild photographers. And so it goes on. That's in front of a big cathedral in India. By the way, we have a very good bookshop in the foundation. So if anyone wants this book or any other books of mine all signed up, please feel free to have a look at the Martin Parr Foundation bookshop. Sorry for the plug there. I've got to get it in, you know.
Get them in, mate. Get them in, absolutely. There's another question here. Do you have a favourite British stereotype? I'll just come back to sharing the screen, Martin, then we can... people can see the picture you've just mentioned. If people can see that. So do you have a favourite British stereotype?
Well, I mean, I suppose the cup of tea. I mean, a church fete in somewhere like Somerset on a nice July afternoon with a tombola and an afternoon tea tent with proper cups and real sponge. That to me would be bliss.
Real sponge with cream in it, proper cream.
Yeah, Victoria sponge. Proper cake with not a plastic cup, but a real ceramic cup.
I thought I'd put the picture in here of the guy with the tank. I had here, yeah. I think this is another interest because the tank is just.
Yeah, that's from the selfie book. This is in the Imperial War Museum.
And there's some. I think I've got some more. Oh, I've got to ask you about this one because there's a two here. I mean, we're running out of time, unfortunately. But this
is also from the City of London project I did. This is part of the Lord Mayor's Parade Day. And you can see here how the boots have that presence.
Yeah, but where's the soldier gone? I asked the question, where's the soldier going to us?
Don't worry, he's coming. Hang on in there.
When I first looked at it, I thought, somebody's photoshopped him out. And then, because obviously now Photoshop gets blamed for everything. And then I looked and thought, no, there's just a pair of boots in the middle of nowhere. Fascinating. We're at 11 o'clock, Martin. It's been absolutely fascinating and a real honour to be able to chat to you. What's Friday entail for you now? I'm
going to go and make some asparagus soup now. And then this afternoon I'm going out for a walk.
Brilliant. With a camera.
And then this weekend I'll be down at Clevedon again, photographing.
Working on a current project?
Well, I mean, my work is somewhat curtailed. I mean, I have been doing some pandemic pictures. I've talked about the queues, and now the seaside is sort of kicking back in to be a bit more busy. So I'm photographing that. But, I'm technically, vulnerable. So I have to be a bit careful about going out and spending too much time with too many people.
I know the seaside.
I'm getting on a bit, remember, Gavin?
Yeah, I know the sea. Well, we all are. Tell me about it. When you get up in the morning and you groan every morning to putting your sock on. I know about the seaside. Because we live on as I said earlier, I live on the seaside, and we're overrun a little bit with litter and various things and things like that.
So, have you been down there shooting the Hornsey at its busiest?
I haven't actually. No, I've sort of boycotted it a little bit because. It's something that I will do. I mean, I have documented quite a lot of Hornsey during this lockdown, which I'm going to put in a little book, and then the proceeds are going to go to charity. So I thought that'd be quite a nice little history, because I think it is very historic what's gone on as well. Becky, have you got anything you'd like to add before Martin
I've got a couple of questions that popped up through the chat. So, what book was the picture in of St. Petersburg? So when the
I know. I don't think it's actually in a book, to be honest. So it's not actually in one.
Oh right, there's your answer.
Bizarre, really, isn't it?
And then
the picture I've only just dug out of the art. I think one of my team members found this picture and put it on Instagram. It got a huge amount of hits. So we've resurrected it, if you like.
Is this the picture where people are stood against the wall sunbathing?
Yeah,
the one we spoke about. Yeah.
And then we've got, what is in Martin's camera bag?
Well, at the moment, as I say, it's going to be a Canon 5D with a Canon flash there with a Gary Fong, and that's it really. That's my basic kit. I mean, I often take out the macro lens as well, and I often would go out with the telephoto too. But generally, it's the 24-70 I use. Brilliant.
Thank you. Well, we've had lots of lovely, encouraging thank yous and absolutely fascinating chats and all lovely kinds of things popping on. We've talked about the foundation, which is fantastic, and I will share the link on the Facebook page to do with getting your discount if you would like to join the foundation, which I know I'll be signing up, and I've got a good feeling that Gavin will be soon too, if he hasn't already.
I'll be watching for his name. If he doesn't come up, I'll be complaining. Don't worry.
I tell you what, I've got on the screen. I've got so many questions, and the clock's ticked past us. But
and the other thing we just put on the site yesterday, in fact, was we've made a whole series of masks. Everyone's wearing a mask, because in fact, people don't wear masks in this country. But we've made a set of masks with 4 photos on. So if you go to the foundation shop, you'll see the link for those masks. So we're selling these as a bit of a fundraiser for the foundation at £20 each.
Brilliant.
Signed.
Yeah, that's it. Signed up already from David Kennedy. That's great. That is great. We've got somebody else who was saying one more hour, because that just seemed to go so quickly. Didn't he? I can't believe how quickly that went, and what a fantastic session we've had.
Well, the other thing you must remember is that we also have a channel on YouTube of the Martin Parr Foundation, and you can see me interviewing many photographers on that for free.
Brilliant, brilliant. So,
and I think if you go on my Instagram, the BJP recently did the editor of the BJP, British Journal of Photography, did a long interview with me on a webinar about 3 or 4 weeks ago. So that's still on our Instagram with a link. So if people want more, there's plenty of opportunities.
there you go, guys. If you need more of your fix of Martin Parr, there's plenty for you.
I mean, can I just ask this one? The story of you and Henry Cartier-Bresson, when he came to your exhibition, and he commented that you were from a different planet.
Yes, and so this is a show that I did in 1995 in Paris around the topic of tourism. It's the first time I actually showed those pictures, and he rolled up. He was obviously still alive then, and didn't like the pictures at all, and wrote me this fax later that night. And when I got this fax from Cartier-Bresson saying, "You're from a different planet," you know, I thought, this is fantastic. You know, I'm going to dine out on this, and indeed I have done, because here you are, you know, 25 years later, talking about it, Gavin.
Exactly. So, well, when you see that name and your name, you just think there's got to be something interesting in this.
That's right. So being criticised by Cartier-Bresson, that is quite a compliment, don't you think?
I just love what you wrote back. I know what you mean.
So I wrote back, thank you, Henri, for your comments, but why shoot the messenger? In other words, I was photographing consumerism, tourism, all the things that he didn't like. He liked his traditional humanistic values. And I said, you know, I basically was arguing that this part of our contemporary society has to be shown. Why hide away from it?
Yeah, totally agree.
Exactly.
Totally agree. Well, I think, you know, we've overstayed our welcome a little bit here. It's 6 minutes past 11, and I'm sure you're very busy. Again, Martin, thank you so much.
Okay, my pleasure.
It's been an absolute pleasure to have a chat with you. And my list of questions, I've probably ticked off about the top 10. I haven't got down the rest, but no, enjoy your weekend in the sun and your soup.
Yes,
right.
I think that soup's lovely with all that asparagus.
Right,
oh yeah, so someone says, what's the image behind Martin on the Call? It's a Chris Killett picture from his book In Flagranti, which is probably the greatest book done by a post-war British documentary photographer.
I think you've got a few people. I'm just looking, there's a few people signing up, so that's always good.
Yes, yes. And we've already got somebody asking, can we invite him to Photo Hubs? Photo Hubs is our events sister company who runs the events. So that we may be sending you an email as soon as people can be in the same place all at once.
Right. Very good.
Fantastic.
Brilliant.
Well, thank you. Let's not keep you as much as we would love to keep you all day. I know we can't.
Okay.
So, thank you
Cheers,
so
everyone.
much.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Take care now, guys. Bye-bye.